We begin on the fringes of Granite City, where the Terminal Railroad Association of St. Louis tracks run alongside those of the UP and the CPKC joint line. Waiting to work south is UP 6271, which was later going to switch the nearby Norfolk Southern A.O. Smith Yard. We caught up with the train just to the south at the next road crossing, as it backs into the Norfolk Southern Yard. The tracks through here were first laid in 1856 as part of an extension down from Alton, which lies to the north. Then known as Illinois Town and now East St. Louis, the coming of the railroad changed the landscape forever as industry and housing neighbourhoods sprang up. The Civil War halted the construction of railroads just for a short while, and by the late 1860s the area had a whole host of railroads, with many more being built well into the early 1900s. Amstead Rail have a large factory across the way here, and where we see this shunting tractor and its chum engaging in some switching. Amtrak number 56 has charge of this, we think a stock move taking cars towards St. Louis. If it wasn't running empty, it could be a heavily delayed Lincoln service, which would mean that it was running at least 10 hours late from Chicago. The CPKC route via Alton and Springfield sees a handful of services each day. In this view, a pair of KCS SD70 Aces, the first dating from 2005 and the second from 2012, head north with a combined domestic stack and manifest working. We head south and to the entrance and exit track to the nearby US Steel plant. Having positioned a string of cars in the complex, Terminal Railroad Association of St. Louis Slug number 308 and ex-Louisville and Nashville GP38 from 1970 leads number 3008, a GP40M-3, which was originally number 3069 from the Denver and Rio Grande, and being built back in February 1967. At the nearby Madison Yard, sister locomotives number 3009 and 309 are seen switching a train ready to be sent over the yard hump. Number 3009 is a GP40M-3 built in 1968 and which originally belonged to Penn Central as number 3164. The Slug, an ex-GP40, was part of the Missouri, Kansas and Texas Railroad, the loco being built in November 1969. The power shop in the foreground is next to the north end of the yard. The St. Louis cityscape is seen in the far background. Note the lone CSX liveried SD60M, number 8756. More about that in a moment. Numbers 4002 and 4001 are SD60s, that are two ex-CSX steeds and which were purchased by TRRA quite recently. They represent some of the more powerful locos on the company's roster. Two further SD60Ms were also purchased from CSX and act as spares donors for these two locos. One of them is number 8756, which we previously mentioned. We were filming from the Broadway Road overbridge, which often resulted in some traffic vibration affecting our camera setup. The yard's hump can be seen here. The other slug combo, numbers 3007 and 307, can be seen in the distance, where they have been split and stand astride the servicing shed. Heading south, we cover two locations in East St. Louis. We begin with this view of the old courthouse in the centre of St. Louis and through the Gateway Arch, as seen from the viewing platform on the opposite side of the Mississippi River in the Malcolm Martin Memorial Park. This light power move down to UP's nearby yard has 722, 628, 1490 and 1498 making up the lash-up. The Poplar Street Bridge, seen in the foreground, takes I-64 across the river. The MacArthur Rail Bridge's three trusses can be seen in the background. The first bridge to span the waters was this, the 1874 Eads Bridge, which was the original rail bridge across the river. Today it carries a road section as well as the tracks for the City of St. Louis Metrolink tram system. In the background can be seen the arches of the Martin Luther King Road Bridge. Just to the south, a quartet of switchers is seen between duties. A pair of Metrolink trams make their way across Eads Bridge, named after its designer, James Eads. The approach spans of the MacArthur Rail Bridge are seen here, as this transfer job, powered by UP 2184 with 2204, 2235 and PAKX 707, heads west across the structure. The three lead locos were originally SD60s, built between 1986 and 1988. A number were given an overhaul and modernised between the years 2013 and 2016, to make long hood forward operation much easier. Number 2184 was subsequently given new computer control equipment in 2019. The fourth loco is an ex-Missouri Pacific machine and now PAKX GP15-1 lease unit, number 707. Finally, UP 6302 leads NS 9431 on this northbound manifest,